Venâncio at FIOCRUZ, where I work as a teacher and researcher. The school is located here in Rio de Janeiro, and since its creation, it's committed to the consolidation of Brazilian unified health system, the SUS, and defending the universal right to health and education. Its political pedagogical project is based on the notion of Polytechnic, which, borrowing the words from Xavier, derives basically from the problematics of labor. Our reference point is the notion of labor and the fact and concept of labor as a general educational principle. These are notions that also guide the curriculum component to initiation of polytechnic education on health, EAP, common to the qualifications of the EPSJV integrated to high school, health management and biodiagnostics. EAP consists of 4 theoretical axes: science, health, politics, and labor. And assuming that the labor process develops the manual and intellectual aspects in unity, these axes are articulated with another curricular strategy, the integration work, which we call TI. It was in this context that we had this experience. The authors of this paper, including myself, have been preceptors of one of these groups. The work is developed in groups of about 10 students, guided by 2 or 3 preceptors. Each team of teachers propose a theme in the health field, with students drawing following their desire to research. Then each TE develops a research product, presenting a final seminar to their colleagues and researchers as a collective review. The form of the presentations is free, and the Center for Educational Technologies, LUTED, in which I work, has accompanied and supported many TE processes. We understand technology not through an instrumental approach, but as part of human action. Strengthening the relationship between technology, education, and health, we try to value the human development as a freedom praxis. The autonomy and the consolidation of a critical subjectivity able to imagine other forms of sociability beyond the capital. So the proposal of game construction ideated the pursuit of integrating knowledge in its various dimensions, intellectual, manual, creative, and affective, which refer to the human formation, which is aligned to our political pedagogical project. We would agree in this work with the principle that games must be fun before and beyond the learning, at the risk of keeping all the focus on the teaching and creating educational games that fail, as pointed out by Fortuna. We are also based on the notion that games as cultural products have a specific play culture, composed of forms and meanings of play, but also mobilize other kinds of knowledge. We also follow the assumption that there's no one right way to design play for any given content, but the result should be that the way the players interact with the game, the process of play, parallels what the game is about. The idea of constructing a game as a systematization of the research was guided then by a procedural approach, educated by Bogost, and in that process we enhanced an inquiry and research of behavior as the students understood the topic and developed metaphorical translations of reality situations into simpler systematization and goals. Our TE group addressed the theme developmentalism and health, proposed by 2 teachers, because the issue of development has marked a substantial part of the recent political and theoretical debate in Brazil, and the issue of health has gained increasing relevance. Through research, we highlighted some characteristics of this debate in the context of a crisis of the liberal capitalist economy. Especially clear were the views that with insufficient budgets, spendings and investments should be rationalized by governments, so planning should be integrated as a state strategy, and that the state started to work as an economic agent, planner, and investor. At the same time, theorists started to defend that to be realistic, economic theory has to become a social theory, which influenced the interrelation of economical, health, and other social policies. At the same time, to introduce students and teachers to game design principles, we had 2 workshops on Saturdays taught by the preceptors of Gamerama, a group for creation and development of games, and the workshops were based on intercalated moments of theory and practice to construct prototypes, focusing on autonomy and collaborative work. During the workshops, we also discussed some types of serious games, as games with an agenda, persuasive games, exemplified with games like from an organization like Game for Health, Booster, etc. As the process went by, we perceived that we had a really challenging subject for high schoolers. When the group started to select and systematize the courses meaningful to the game, we focused on the current scenario of the health sector in the context of the Brazilian Unified Health System, the SUS, which is an universal and public system of state responsibility established by the 1988 Federal Constitution. Our research showed that the supplementary participation of private institutions make the conflicts of interest inherent in the system, which see many times distinct and conflicting objectives: to ensure the health of people, the income of entrepreneurs, the employment of people who work in the system, and others. The research also brought to light some assumptions that guide the design of consolidation of SUS as a universal public system, like health as an expanded concept, including the social determination of the processes of health and disease, which calls for the need of intersectoral policies, the conjuncture of capitalist and liberal state economy and its speculative character, and the inclusion of health in the National Development Project, including health as an important economically productive sector, in which SUS sometimes becomes an important means of growth and development, also to the private sector. Based on these findings, it became clear that the game should involve elements of dispute, competition, associations, and negotiations, having as a background the dispute between a neoliberal model and a non-liberal model of health, highlighting the tensions and trends observed. The students proposed that the game should be for more than one player, which was considered positive for the possibility of collective playing and discussions and debate. Their first idea was to create a simple board game with a more or less linear path, but given the complexity of interrelationships identified, the teachers chose to introduce students to a new game, Stephen Jackson's Munchkin. I don't know if any of you know it, but it's a card game, in order to present them different structures, game mechanics, and rules of operations. Then we decided to research who were the characters of these disputes, what were their goals, interests, powers, and weaknesses. And from a wide range of actors involved in the structuring and functioning of the system, we opted for three: the public, the private, and the philanthropic sectors, which are directly and complementary, involved in providing medical care to the population. We then focused on the establishment of challenging situations, the relationships between the players and between resources earned and expended, which showed to be a great space of exploration, construction, and systematization of knowledge. The group established that the game would be for 3 to 6 players, at least one from each sector. After discussing how to define the amount of resources of each character, the group decided that each one would have loose or tight resources, determining the amount of funding and the level of influence at the beginning of the game. So here are the poor ones and the rich ones. The poor ones have less influence than the rich ones, usually. Inspired then by the functionality of Munchkin, we defined that characters would have different goals, but to achieve them metaphorically, players should face challenges to obtain the necessary attributes. One of the students suggested the creation of a board to mark clearly the progression of the player, and other students called attention to the fact that a linear board with parallel tracks would cause the perception that the players had similar goals, or that they were progressing in time, and that was not the case. Meeting of challenges. The solution was then to build the board with concentric circles, where players start in the center and go towards the borders, each going through his or her track, reaching particular goals. The challenge cards were the most mobilizing elements of most of the discussions. They gave to the students the need to recover and seek the knowledge to define the possibilities to put on each card. In this image, we exemplify the decision tree of one of the challenge cards. I skipped one. In case the player has 100 yaps, their currency, to buy equipment and increase attendance, he or she can directly overcome it. In case not, the player could receive help from a congressman if he or she has influence higher than 4, and roll the dice to see the amount of subsidy the government would offer. Enter a fraud scheme to buy cheaper equipment and draw a fiscalization card to see the outcome, or pass the turn to the next player and receive a normal, regular income. In the situations of fraud, players can establish illicit relations with suppliers, forge diagnoses in order to receive more resources. All situations subject to surveillance, which have different possibilities of resolution. The denouncement, the payment of bribery, or riddance, depending on the level of influence of the character. We only had 2 test sessions before the presentation, but the game is still in the prototype stage. So, to wrap up. Simplifying the rules of the health system, to build the rules of the game, students became more aware of the relationships between the actors, the challenges and contradictions involved in the healthcare model existing in Brazil today. Based on the defense of Guy, that learning features found in good games are also supported and encouraged as features of good learning processes, we point some of these features found in the process developed. Students assume the position of producers, not only consumers, appropriating the game as their responsibility in creation and reflecting about relationships, processes, and possibilities. The consequences of failure were reduced because everybody was inside a collective construction environment in which all possibilities could be raised and debated without preconceptions. Different skills were mobilized in the construction of the game and its presentation because students performed the tests required their affinity. Construction of situations, discussion of rules, elaboration of illustrations, search for the references, or the oral presentation. Even students who at first did not feel comfortable with the topic in the construction of rules became involved in the discussion. We also want to stress the importance of the space configuration and relationships between preceptors and students, because the students' participation was higher, not only with the construction of the game, but also with the relocation of the meetings to an area of large tables, which allowed interaction and manipulation. We believe that this game can be used as material for other teaching and learning, to know some nuances of our universal public health system, how is it structured, what are the challenges of its universalization. We intend to organize other evaluation and modification moments, trying to validate the game in other levels. As a whole, the identification, discussion, and questioning of the processes characterize the active construction of knowledge as a higher game, rather than the mere reception of values and data through conventional didactic materials. We learned that the game production is a strategy that serves not only as a means to produce educational material, to promote further relevant debates, but equally or more important than the use that might be made in the future was the production process. Incorporating the procedural approach and freedom to create in the collective process of the construction of the game and the cards, the content was prepared and synthesized, and the values and political cultures that the group desired to convey through playing were negotiated. We believe then that this method could be tried with rich outcomes in other educational contexts. Thank you. The references.